I've been driving the 414 for 11 years. People don't think about what that means. They think driving a bus is sitting and steering, which is like saying surgery is just cutting. You learn a route the way you learn a body. Not the map of it, the feel. Which intersections have a half-second delay on the green arrow after rain? Where the pavement dips near Caldwell and 7th, so you have to ease left, or the rear axle jolts hard enough to knock a standing passenger into the fare box. What time the sun hits the windshield on the westbound return in October, so you're driving blind for exactly 40 seconds between Moorhead and Park, unless you flip the visor and drop your sightline to the road paint. 11 years on one route. The 414 runs a lopsided figure 8 through the eastern third of the city. Starts at Greystone Transit Center at 5:40 a.m., makes 46 stops on the full loop, returns to Greystone at 7:52 a.m., if traffic cooperates, which it doesn't, so usually 8:05 or 8:10. Then you do it again. 5 full loops per shift, 6 days a week. I could drive it in a coma. Some mornings I basically do. I'm telling you this because I need you to understand. I know every stop. Every single one. I know the ones that nobody uses on Sundays, and the ones where the bench is broken, and people stand in the mulch, and the ones where the shelter smells like piss, no matter how recently the city cleaned it. I know which stops have regulars and which ones are ghosts listed on the schedule, equipped with signage, technically functional, but nobody's waiting there at any hour on any day. I have 11 years of exposed nerve endings wired into 46 stops on a lopsided figure 8, and I am telling you that on the morning of March 11th, there were 47. I need to go back before that, though. My name is Dara Pajic. I'm 44. I was born in this city, grew up on the South Side, dropped out of Western Lakeview Community College after one semester of a nursing program I couldn't afford, and took the Transit Authority entrance exam. Because my mother's boyfriend at the time, Grady, drove the 206 and said the benefits were good. Grady was a liar about almost everything, but he was right about the benefits. I've had the same dental plan for 11 years and I've used it exactly the way it was intended, which is to say, aggressively and without gratitude. I was married for 6 years to a man named Neil Pajic. He was a good man, in the way that a lot of good men are good, which is passively, compliantly, without friction. He didn't hit. He didn't cheat. He didn't drink enough to be a problem. He also didn't ask me a question about my interior life for the last 4 years of our marriage, and when I told him I wanted a divorce, he said, "Okay," the same way he said it when I asked him to pick up toilet paper. Some people's goodness is just the absence of effort in any direction. I don't hate Neil. Nothing. Him. That's worse. And we both know it. We had a daughter, Lily. She's 19 now. I'm not ready to talk about Lily yet. The 414's morning shift starts in the dark. You report to Greystone at 5:10, do your walk around, check your mirrors and lights, log into the fare system, and pull out by 5:40. In winter, the first 3 stops are just headlights on empty sidewalks. Nobody boards until Fenwick Crossing, which is stop number 4, where the hospital shift change nurses wait in their scrubs with their coffees and their 1,000-yard stares. I liked the dark. I liked the early quiet. I liked the version of the city that existed before. It put its face on the one with the foxes trotting across Caldwell Boulevard and the traffic lights cycling through their colors for nobody. The 414 at 5:40 a.m. was mine in a way that almost nothing else in my life was. The bus didn't need me to be anything other than competent and consistent. It didn't need me to feel. It just needed me to show up and drive the figure 8 and bring everyone where they were going. For 11 years, that was enough. I should tell you about Marcus, because Marcus is the reason everything happened. Marcus Young, 26 years old, hired by the Transit Authority in September. Assigned to the 414 as my relief driver, he took the afternoon shift, 2 p.m. to 10:15 p.m., driving the same bus I drove in the morning. We overlapped for about 20 minutes during the midday handoff at Greystone. That was our entire relationship for the first 3 months, 20 minutes a day, 5 or 6 days a week, in a transit center break room that smelled like burned coffee and floor wax. Marcus was the kind of young man who made you conscious of your own age, not because he was dismissive of it, but because he was so sincerely interested in it. He asked questions, real ones, not small talk dressed up as curiosity, actual questions that required actual answers. What was the worst weather I'd driven through? Whether I'd ever had a passenger emergency, and what I did. How I handled the blind spot on the merge at Lakeshore and Industrial. Whether I liked the job or just tolerated it, and how I could tell the difference. Nobody had asked me that last one before. Not Neil, not my mother, not any of the other drivers in 11 years of break room overlaps. I told Marcus the truth, which was that I didn't know, and that the not knowing had become a kind of comfort, because at least it was settled. He looked at me the way young people look at you when they think you've said something profound, but you've actually just said something broken. We became friends. Carefully, in the way that a 44-year-old woman and a 26-year-old man can be friends without anyone constructing a narrative about it, which is to say we were careful in public and honest in private, and the private honesty was never about sex. It was about the thing that's harder to admit to than sex, which is loneliness. Marcus was new to the city. He'd come from Spokane after something he didn't talk about, and I understood not talking about things well enough to never push. We texted in the evenings. We ate lunch together on Saturdays when our shifts aligned. He told me about his mother's garden, and I told him about Lily, or at least the version of Lily I could talk about without my hands shaking. By December, Marcus was the person I spoke to most in any given day. By January, he was the person I spoke to most in my life. By February, I realized that if Marcus quit or transferred or simply stopped showing up, the shape of my days would collapse in a way I wasn't prepared to rebuild from. That realization should have been a warning. It was. I ignored it. I need to talk about Lily now. Lily was born in 2007. She was a quiet baby, a watchful toddler, a strange and serious child who collected dead insects in a shoebox and arranged them by color. I thought this was brilliant. Neil thought it was disturbing. In retrospect, we were both projecting. Lily was fine genuinely, structurally fine, until she was 15. Then she wasn't. The not fine arrived like weather, gradually, then all at once. Then so pervasive, it became the climate. She stopped sleeping. She started lying with a fluency that frightened me, because it was so much better than anything else she did with effort. She found substances the way water finds cracks, through whatever path was available, and the paths were everywhere. I did what you do. I fought. I researched. I called. I drove her to appointments and facilities and meetings. I held her hair while she vomited, and I held her hand while she cried, and I held my tongue while she screamed at me that I was the reason. I was always the reason. That my coldness and my control and my inability to love anything that didn't operate on a fixed route was the reason she wanted to disappear. She wasn't wrong about all of it. Neil and I divorced when Lily was 16. He moved to Portland. He calls Lily on her birthday and at Christmas and sends checks that she cashes immediately and spends on whatever she's currently using to not feel her own life. I don't blame him for leaving. I blame him for how easy it was. Lily is 19 now. She lives somewhere in the city. I think the east side, near the rail yard, but I'm not certain, because she changes locations the way other people change clothes. We talk sometimes. Short, transactional calls. She needs money, or she's telling me she's okay so I won't call the police for a welfare check, or she's angry about something I did or didn't do 15 years ago. Every conversation is a different door into the same room. The last time I saw her in person was November 14th. She came to my apartment because she needed her birth certificate for something she wouldn't explain. She was thin. Not sick thin, reduced thin, like someone had taken an eraser to her margins. She stood in my kitchen for 4 minutes while I found the document, and in those 4 minutes, she didn't look at me once. Not out of anger, out of something worse. She had stopped seeing me as a person who existed in her present tense. I was an archive she needed to access. When she left, she said thanks, without the second syllable. Just, then. And the door closed, and I stood in my kitchen holding the folder the birth certificate had been in, and I felt something settle in my chest, like silt. That was November. By March, I hadn't seen her again. She'd stopped answering my calls in January. The last text I sent, just let me know you're okay, showed as delivered but unread for 43 days. Part 2. The Stop. March 11th. It was a Tuesday. Cold for March, low 30s. The kind of cold that doesn't bite, but just leans on you. I did my walk around in the dark, checked my mirrors, logged in, pulled out of Greystone at 5:41, 1 minute late, because the fare system took an extra cycle to boot, which it does sometimes, when the temperature drops. The first 3 stops were empty, as usual. The nurses boarded at Fenwick Crossing, as usual. The route unfolded under me like a tongue I'd been speaking for 11 years. Stop 5, stop 6, stop 7. The sky lightened from black to gray to a pale metallic blue that looked like the inside of a can. I was between stops 23 and 24, Delancey Park and Roth Avenue, a straight half-mile stretch along the south edge of the industrial district when I saw it. A bus stop sign, Standard Transit Authority design, green pole, white rectangle, route number in the blue circle, the little bench underneath with the perforated metal seat. It was on the right side of the road, exactly where a stop should be, set back from the curb at the regulation distance. It had the 414 route marker. It had a posted schedule under the plexiglass. It had a trash can bolted to the concrete pad. It did not exist yesterday. I know this the way I know my own hands. I have driven this half-mile stretch of road 5 times a day, 6 days a week, for 11 years. There are no stops between Delancey Park and Roth Avenue. There have never been stops between Delancey Park and Roth Avenue. The industrial district is zoning restricted. The Transit Authority applied for a mid-block stop in 2019 and was denied by the city because there's no pedestrian infrastructure on that stretch, and the liability was too high. I know this because I was on the driver advisory committee that reviewed the application. I voted against it myself. And yet, the sign, the bench, the schedule, the trash can, a stop, complete and real and material, in a place where no stop existed 12 hours ago. I didn't slow down. I drove past it at speed. In the mirror, I watched it shrink, but not disappear. It stayed solid. It stayed there. I finished the loop. I did the whole figure 8. I came back around to the same stretch at 7:20 a.m., and the stop was still there. And this time, someone was sitting on the bench. A woman. Older, maybe 60. Heavy coat, plastic bags at her feet, the posture of someone who waits for buses professionally. She looked up as I approached. She had a face like a lot of the faces I see on my route, tired, patient, expecting nothing, and prepared to wait for it anyway. I didn't stop. Her face tracked the bus as I passed. In the mirror, I saw her settle back on the bench. Not angry, not surprised. Just resettling, the way you do when the bus isn't yours and you know another one is coming. But there was no other one coming. The 414 is the only route on that stretch, and there was no stop to come to. At Greystone, during the turnaround break, I pulled up the Transit Authority's stop database on the dispatch terminal. Every active stop on the 414 was listed, 46. None between Delancey Park and Roth Avenue. I called dispatch. Yeah, hi. This is Pagich on the 414. Quick question. Did maintenance install a new stop on the southbound industrial stretch between Delancey and Roth? Hold on. Keyboard sounds. No, nothing scheduled for that corridor. Why? There's a sign out there. Full installation bench, schedule, everything. Probably a filming thing. They did that last spring on the 200 corridor. Put up fake stops for some movie and didn't take them all down. This one has the current 414 schedule under the plexiglass. Pause. I'll put in a work order for someone to check it out. Okay. I did my second loop. The stop was still there. The woman was gone. But a man was sitting on the bench now, younger, wearing earbuds, bobbing his head to something I couldn't hear. He looked up as I passed. He didn't flag me. He just watched. Third loop. Empty bench. Fourth loop. 2 teenagers, sharing a phone screen, laughing. Fifth loop. Empty again. I finished my shift at 1:45 p.m. During the handoff, I told Marcus about the stop. He frowned. Between Delancey and Roth? There's nothing there. I know. That's what I'm telling you. Like, someone put up a sign? Someone put up a stop, poured a concrete pad, bolted a bench, installed the schedule. Overnight. Marcus looked at me with that expression I'd come to recognize, the one that meant he was taking me seriously, in a way that felt almost aggressive. I'll watch for it on my run. He texted me at 4:15 p.m. I don't see it. I stared at the text. I read it 4 times. Between Delancey and Roth, southbound side, halfway between the 2 stops. Dara, there's nothing there. I just drove past it. Twice. I went back that night, drove my own car, out to the industrial stretch at 9 p.m., parked on the shoulder, and walked. There was nothing there. No sign, no bench, no concrete pad. The gravel shoulder was unbroken. The grass behind it was undisturbed. There was no indication that anything had ever been installed, removed, or even imagined in that spot. I stood where I was certain the stop had been. I stood there for 10 minutes, in the dark, in the cold, feeling the traffic pass behind me, and I tried to locate the feeling in my body. It wasn't fear. It wasn't confusion, exactly. It was something closer to recognition. The dull, heavy awareness that something had been trying to get my attention and had chosen the one language I was guaranteed to understand. A bus stop. On my route. That only I could see. Part 3. Passengers. It was there the next morning. Same place, same sign, same bench, same schedule. But this time, the schedule had changed. Under the plexiglass, where yesterday it showed the standard 414 timetable, there was now a single line of text. 5:52 a.m. Lily. I pulled over. I didn't mean to. My foot went to the brake the way your hand goes to a ringing phone, automatic, bypassing thought. The bus hissed to a stop at the curb, right in front of the bench, and I opened the doors, because that's what you do when you stop at a stop. You open the doors. No one was there. The bench was empty. The schedule showed what it showed. Behind me, a nurse named Claudette, who boarded at Fenwick every morning at 5:48 and rode to the hospital transfer at stop 31, said, "Everything okay, driver?" I closed the doors. I pulled away. In the mirror, the stop sat there, solid and patient. For the rest of that loop, I drove with my hands shaking. Not from fear. From the specific, targeted cruelty of seeing my daughter's name printed in transit authority font on a schedule at a stop that didn't exist. I didn't tell Marcus. I want to be clear about that. I made the decision not to tell him, and it was a decision, not an oversight. I didn't tell him, because if I told him, he would do what Marcus always did, which was take me seriously. And I couldn't afford to have someone take this seriously because taking it seriously meant it was real. And if it was real, then something knew my daughter's name and had put it on a sign specifically for me. And I was not prepared to live in a world where that was true. So instead, I told him I'd been wrong about the stop. Probably a shadow and a mile marker. Tired eyes at 5 a.m. He accepted this easily. People always accept the boring explanation because the boring explanation doesn't require anything of them. But he looked at me a beat too long when he said okay. March 13th. Third day. The stop was there. The schedule read 5:52. a.m. Lily, 6:14 a.m. Lily, 7:03 a.m. Lily. 3 arrivals. My daughter, scheduled like a package. I didn't stop. I gripped the wheel and drove past. And I didn't look at the bench, and I didn't look at the schedule. And I stared at the road until the stretch was behind me, and then I pulled into the Roth Avenue stop, where nobody was waiting, and I sat with the engine idling, and I pressed my forehead against the steering wheel and I breathed. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Mom. I almost dropped the phone. Mom, it's Lily. New phone. Can we meet? My hands were shaking so badly I could barely type. Where are you? Are you okay? I am okay. Can you come to me? I'll text you. Where? My chest was doing something it hadn't done in months, which was hoping. The feeling was so unfamiliar it was almost painful, like blood returning to a limb that's been asleep. Of course. When? Today? After your shift? I am near the industrial district. I went cold, not metaphorically. The temperature in my body dropped. I could feel it in my fingers and my teeth and the base of my spine. Lily, where exactly are you? I'll send you the address. Just come to the bus stop on the south side of the road. The one between Delancey and Roth. You know the one. I put the phone down on the dashboard. I stared at it. The screen stayed lit, waiting for my response, and I watched the cursor blink in the text field like a heartbeat. Then I picked the phone up and called Lily's real number. The one I'd been texting for 2 years. The one that had shown my messages as delivered but unread for 43 days. It rang. It rang. It rang. Hello? Lily's voice. Her real voice. Thick with sleep. Lily, it's Mom. What? It's like 6 in the morning. I know, I'm sorry. Are you okay? I'm sleeping. What do you want? Did you just text me? From a new number? Silence. Then, no, I didn't text you. I've been asleep. You didn't send me a message just now? Asking me to meet you? Mom, what are you talking about? Are you okay? The longest pause of my life. I'm fine. I'm sorry I woke you up. Go back to sleep. You're being weird. I know. I'm sorry. I love you. She hung up without responding to that, which was normal, which was the most reassuring thing that had happened to me all morning. I looked at the texts from the unknown number. They were still there. I read them again. Mom, it's Lily. New phone. Can we meet? I blocked the number. I deleted the conversation. I finished my shift. I didn't look at the stop on any of my remaining loops. I kept my eyes fixed on the road, and I counted the seconds until I was past it each time. And the count was always different. Sometimes 4 seconds, sometimes 9. Sometimes what felt like 30, even though the stretch of road never changed length. That night, Marcus came over. This requires some explanation. Marcus had never been to my apartment before. Our friendship existed in the transit center break room and in text messages and in one Saturday lunch at a pho restaurant near Greystone. But that evening, he texted me, "You seemed off today. Can I bring food?" And I said yes, because I was frightened and lonely, and the apartment felt like a place where a phone could ring at any time with a voice that sounded like my daughter but wasn't. He brought Thai food and we sat on my couch, and he didn't ask me what was wrong, which was exactly right. He talked about his mother's garden in Spokane, how she was planning the spring planting, how she was trying a new variety of tomato that was supposed to be blight-resistant. He talked about it for 20 minutes. The soil amendments, the raised bed construction, the argument she was having with a neighbor about a fence line. And I realized he was doing something I hadn't experienced in so long. I'd forgotten it existed. He was filling a room with ordinary life so I wouldn't have to sit in the silence alone. "Marcus," I said. "Yeah. Thank you." He looked at me. "For what?" "For the tomatoes." He laughed. It was a good sound. I hadn't made anyone laugh in a long time. After he left, I checked my phone. No messages from unknown numbers. No texts from Lily. The evening sat around me like a normal evening, and I went to bed at 10:30, and I slept without dreaming, and I thought it might be over. Part 4. The offer. It wasn't over. March 14th. The stop was there. The schedule now read 5:52 a.m. Dara. My name. Not my daughter's. Mine. I drove past it. My jaw was clenched so tight I could hear my teeth. At Roth Avenue, nobody boarded. I pulled away and continued the loop. And when I came back around on the second run, the schedule had changed again. 5:52 a.m. Dara, you know she's dying. I stopped the bus. I didn't mean to. I have said this before, and I will say it again. My foot went to the brake, and the doors went open, and the bus hissed to a stop in front of the bench, and I sat there, staring through the windshield at the schedule under the plexiglass, and I read the words over and over, and my body made a sound I didn't recognize as coming from me. Claudette, the nurse, behind me. Driver, are we at a stop? I closed the doors. I pulled away. I drove the rest of the shift with those words sitting in my chest like a stone. You know she's dying. And the true, terrible thing, was that I did know. Not in the way that you know a fact, but in the way that you know the weather is going to turn. I knew Lily was dying. I had known it for a year. I had known it every time she didn't answer the phone, every time the text showed as delivered but unread. Every time I drove past the east side near the rail yard and didn't stop, because stopping meant looking, and looking meant seeing, and seeing meant knowing, in the factual way, instead of the weather way, and I was not strong enough for that. The stop knew this. Whatever was putting words under plexiglass in transit authority font at a stop that didn't exist on any map, it knew the exact shape of the wound it was pressing on. That afternoon, during the handoff, Marcus said, "There's a stop between Delancey and Roth." I looked at him. On my run today. Third loop. It was there. Green sign, bench, everything. He was pale. Dara. It had my name on it. Everything I had been keeping sealed broke open. Not dramatically, I didn't cry, didn't shout. It broke the way a seam breaks, quietly, along the line of weakest resistance. It's been there for 4 days, I said. For me. We sat in the break room and I told him everything. The schedule changes, the texts, Lily's name, my name. You know she's dying. He listened without interrupting, which was his gift, and when I finished, he said, "What does it want?" "I think it wants me to get off at the stop." "Don't." "I know." "Dara, don't." "I know." But I didn't know. That was the problem. Because the stop wasn't asking me to do something insane. It wasn't asking me to walk into a dark forest or descend into a tunnel or touch something I shouldn't touch. It was asking me to do the most ordinary thing in the world. Get off a bus. Step down from the driver's seat. Walk through the doors. And stand on a concrete pad next to a bench. In daylight. On a road I'd driven 10,000 times. The ask was so small that refusing it felt like the irrational choice. And underneath that, quieter, was the thing I couldn't say to Marcus. What if it could actually help? What if, at a stop that existed outside the map, something was possible that wasn't possible inside it? What if the impossible stop was an impossible chance, and I was driving past it 5 times a day because I was too afraid to step outside the route I'd built my entire life around? I didn't say this, but Marcus heard it anyway, because Marcus always heard the thing under the thing, and he looked at me with an expression that wasn't worry. Exactly. It was something closer to grief. "You're not going to go, right?" "I'm not going to go. Promise me." "I promise." I lied. Part 5. Others. 2 things happened on March 15th that changed the trajectory of everything. The first, I checked the Transit Authority's incident log, which I had access to as a senior driver. I wasn't looking for anything specific. I was looking for anything, and I found it. Over the past 18 months, 6 drivers on various routes across the city had filed maintenance requests for unauthorized stop installations on their routes. 6 drivers, 6 different routes, each one reporting a stop that appeared where no stop should be complete, with signage, bench, schedule, and the correct route marker. In every case, the maintenance crew found nothing when they went to investigate. In every case, the driver who filed the report was no longer with the transit authority. Not fired, not transferred, just no longer listed. Their employee records existed, but were marked separated voluntary, with no exit interview, no forwarding address, no final paycheck issued. I knew one of them, Gerald Macy, who'd driven the 112 for 8 years. Good driver, reliable, quiet. One day he filed a maintenance request about a stop on his route that shouldn't exist, and 2 weeks later his name was gone from the schedule and nobody I asked could remember his last day. I sat at the dispatch terminal and stared at 6 names and felt the specific kind of fear that comes not from what you're seeing, but from the scale implied by what you're seeing. 6 drivers, 18 months, 6 different routes. This was not something happening to me. This was something that happened, that had a history and a pattern, and I was not the first and would not be the last. The second thing that happened, Lily called me. Not the unknown number, her real voice. Mom. Lily? Hi. Are you? I need help. 3 words. The 3 words I'd been waiting to hear for 3 years. The 3 words I'd imagined in the shower and in the car and in bed at night, and during every silent second of every empty loop on the 414. I need help. 3 words that meant she could see herself clearly enough to know she was in trouble and brave enough to say it out loud and trusting enough still, after everything, to say it to me. Tell me where you are. I'm at the bridge, the footbridge near the rail yard. I'll be there in 15 minutes. Don't move. Mom. Don't move, Lily. I'm coming. I drove to the footbridge. It took 12 minutes. I parked on the access road and walked up the path, and she was there, sitting on the pedestrian railing with her legs hanging over the edge, and she was so thin I could see the architecture of her skeleton through her jacket, and her hair was unwashed, and her face was a map of everything that had happened to her since November. And I walked up to her, and I put my hand on her back, and she leaned into me and she cried. We sat on that bridge for an hour. She told me things I'm not going to repeat because they're hers, not mine. But the summary is, she was ready. She wanted to go to a facility. She wanted to try. She was afraid that trying meant finding out she couldn't do it, and she was more afraid of that than of dying. But she wanted to try anyway. I drove her to Street Adelines, which is the intake facility on the west side that takes people without insurance if you know which forms to fill out. And I knew which forms to fill out because I'd researched it at 3 a.m. on 100 different nights. She went in. They took her. She looked back at me through the glass doors of the lobby and she raised her hand, not a wave, just a raised hand, an acknowledgement, and then she turned and followed the intake nurse down the hall. I sat in the parking lot for 45 minutes and I shook. That night, I drove to the industrial stretch, in my own car, at 10 p.m. The stop was there. It was there, in the dark, in my civilian car, on a night when it shouldn't have been visible because it had only ever appeared during my bus shifts. But there it was. Green pole, white sign, bench, schedule. I parked. I got out. I walked up to it. The schedule under the plexiglass said, "She called because I let her. She's there because I put her there. You owe me. Sit down." I read it 3 times. The air around the stop was different, not colder, not warmer, but denser, like the molecules were packed more tightly, like reality had higher resolution here. The bench was real. I touched it. Cold metal, perforated, exactly like every other transit bench in the city. She called because I let her. Was that true? Was Lily's phone call the real one, the one that broke through 3 months of silence. Was that arranged? Had something reached into my daughter's life and turned her toward help, not because she was ready, but because it needed me to feel grateful? And the worst part, did it matter? If Lily was at Street Adeline's, if she was safe, if she was starting treatment, did it matter why? If the result was my daughter alive and asking for help, could I afford to care about the mechanism? I stood in front of the bench. The schedule glowed faintly. Not illuminated, there was no light behind it, but glowing, as if the text itself was producing light, as if the words were warmer than the air. Sit down, Dara. You have been driving for 11 years. You can stop. I sat down. Part 6. The bench. Nothing happened. I sat on the bench, and nothing happened. The metal was cold through my jeans. The road was empty. A car passed, its headlights sweeping across me, and I was just a woman sitting at a bus stop at night, which is not unusual, which is not remarkable, which is the most ordinary thing in the world. I sat there for 5 minutes, 10, 15. The schedule didn't change. The air didn't shift. The road stayed the road. I felt foolish, and then I felt relieved, and then I felt something else, a settling, a quieting, like the moment between the end of an engine's vibration and the beginning of actual silence. A liminal hush, the world holding its breath. At the 20-minute mark, a bus came. Not the 414. The 414 doesn't run at 10 p.m. on this stretch. The evening service truncates the loop at Moorhead. But a bus came, the right shape, the right size, the right color. It had a route number on the front display, but the number was wrong. Not wrong as in incorrect, wrong as in not a number. It was a symbol I couldn't parse, something between a letter and a digit, something my brain kept trying to resolve into familiar notation and failing. The bus stopped in front of me. The doors opened. The driver was Gerald Macy. I recognized him immediately. Gerald, who'd driven the 112. Gerald, who'd filed a maintenance request and then vanished. He was sitting in the driver's seat in his transit authority uniform, hands on the wheel, looking at me through the open doors with an expression that was calm and patient and not entirely human. Not inhuman, not monstrous, not wrong. Just the way a face looks when it's been calm for too long, when patience has replaced all the other things a face is supposed to do. Dara, he said. Getting on? Gerald? It's warm on the bus. You've been sitting in the cold. Gerald, what happened to you? I got off at the stop. He said it simply, same as you're about to do, except I got on. And it's better here, Dara. It's so much better. Better how? You know the feeling at 5:40 a.m.? When it's dark, and the route is empty, and the city hasn't started yet, and it's just you and the road? It's like that. All the time. Forever. The bus was warm. I could feel it from the bench, the heat rolling out through the open doors like breath. Inside, I could see passengers. Not many. 5, maybe 6. Sitting in the blue seats, looking out the windows at nothing, at the dark, at whatever landscape existed on the other side of the glass. They looked peaceful. They looked like people at the end of a very long day who had finally found a seat. Lily's at Street Adeline's, I said. Gerald nodded. She is. Because of the stop. Because of whatever this is. She's there because she called you, and you answered. What moved her to call? That's a complicated question. But she's there. That's what matters, isn't it? What do you want? A driver. He said it like it was obvious. The route needs a driver. It always needs a driver. People are waiting at stops that don't exist for buses that don't come, and they've been waiting a long time. And they're tired, Dara. They're so tired. What people? The ones between the stops. The ones the maps don't show. You've driven past them for 11 years. You've seen them in your peripheral vision, sitting on curbs where there are no shelters, standing on corners where no route goes. You looked away because you were on the route. You were on the schedule. But they're there, and they need a bus, and the bus needs a driver who knows the roads. I looked at the passengers through the windows. One of them turned to look at me. She was older, heavy-set, wearing a coat I recognized. She was the woman I'd seen on the bench the first day, the one who'd watched me drive past. She smiled. It was a tired smile, a waiting room smile. "If I get on," I said, "I don't come back." "You don't come back to this," Gerald said. "You come back to something else, something bigger. You think the 414 is your life, but it's one line on a map, Dara. There are so many more lines." The heat from the bus, the hum of the engine, the passengers sitting quietly in the blue seats, the calm, infinite patience on Gerald's face. I stood up from the bench. I did not get on the bus. I need you to understand how close I came. I was standing. I was facing the doors. The warmth was on my face, and the engine was humming the frequency I'd known for 11 years, the specific harmonic of a transit authority diesel engine at idle. And every part of my body that was tired, and all of me was tired. All of me had been tired for years. Every part leaned toward those doors like gravity. But Lily was at Street Adeline's. She had raised her hand. Not a wave, an acknowledgement. She was in a building, in a bed, beginning the hardest thing she'd ever done, and in the morning she would wake up and the first day would start. And whether she knew it or not, whether she wanted it or not, the fact that I existed in the same city, driving the same route, living in the same apartment, with the same phone number she'd memorized when she was 8 that mattered. Not because I could save her. I couldn't. I'd spent 3 years learning that I couldn't. But because the structure of a life that's waiting for you on the outside is a thing you can orient toward even when you can't see it, the way a pilot orients toward a signal in fog. If I got on the bus, I became one more person who left. I'd spent 11 years refusing to be that. I'd stayed on the route. I'd driven the figure 8. I'd kept the same phone number and the same apartment and the same schedule, and I'd done it not because I was brave or patient or good, but because I was there, consistently and boringly there. And being there was the only thing I had to offer that nobody else could provide. "No," I said. Gerald's face didn't change. "She'll be okay without you, Dara. She'll be better, actually. The guilt is the only thing tying you to that side. Let it go." "You don't know that. I know everything about the roots." "You know about roots. You don't know about my daughter." The warmth receded, not abruptly, gradually, like a tide going out. The engine's hum dropped half a tone. Gerald's hands shifted on the wheel. "The stop will be there tomorrow," he said. "I know. It'll be there every day. I know. One day you'll be tired enough. Maybe." The doors closed. The bus pulled away from the curb. I watched its taillights move down the road, and they were red the way taillights are red, and then they were red the way nothing else is red, a red that went deeper than the visible spectrum, a red that wasn't a color but a direction, and then they were gone, and the road was empty, and the stop was gone, and I was standing on gravel in the dark. Part 7. After. The stop was there the next morning, and the morning after that, and every morning since. The schedule changes. Sometimes it says Lily's name. Sometimes it says mine. Sometimes it says things that are true, and things that are almost true, and things that would be true if I were a slightly different person, a slightly weaker person, a person who'd given up in any of the 100 moments where giving up was the reasonable choice. Sometimes people are waiting on the bench. They look at me as I pass. They don't flag me down. They just watch, patient and tired, and I drive past them, and I don't stop, and I know they'll be there on the next loop. Marcus knows. I told him everything the morning after I sat on the bench, and he listened, and he said, "We need to report this." And I said, "To whom?" And he didn't have an answer, because there is no answer. The transit authority's maintenance crew will find nothing. The dispatchers will file the request and forget it. The incident log will note the report, and if the pattern holds, I'll become one more name marked separated voluntary. So instead, Marcus and I made a different choice. We didn't report it. We didn't investigate it. We didn't try to understand it, or expose it, or document it. We simply agreed that it was there, and that we would not stop. This is not heroic. This is not a mystery solved, or a system exposed, or a duty accepted. This is two people driving a bus route with 47 stops, one of which doesn't exist, and choosing every day to count only 46. Lily has been at Street Adelines for 26 days now. She calls me on Wednesdays. The calls are short and hard. She is angry at me for things I did and things I didn't do and things I couldn't have done differently. And she is right about some of it and wrong about some of it, and I sit with all of it because sitting with it is the job. Last Wednesday she said, "I don't know if this is going to work." I said, "I know." "That's not what you're supposed to say." "What am I supposed to say?" Something encouraging. Something like, "I believe in you. I believe in you. You're just saying it because I told you to." Yes, but it's also true. She was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "You're still driving the 414? Every day. Same route?" "Same route." "That's so depressing, Mom." "I know, but also, like, I don't know, it's kind of good that you're just there, doing the same thing." "I'm here." "Yeah." That was Wednesday. Today is Saturday. In 7 hours, I will wake up in the dark. I will drive to Greystone. I will do my walk around, check my mirrors, log into the fare system, and pull out at 5:40 or 5:41 or 5:42. I will drive past Fenwick Crossing, where Claudette will board with her coffee and her 1,000-yard stare. I will drive 23 stops to Delancey Park, and then I will enter the half-mile stretch along the south edge of the industrial district, and the stop will be there. And maybe someone will be sitting on the bench, and maybe the schedule will say my name, and I will not stop. I won't stop, because stopping is how they get you. Not through force, not through deception, not through anything monstrous or alien. They get you through the thing you want most. They get you through the offer that makes sense. They get you through the warm bus on the cold night, the patient voice, the reasonable argument that your pain is optional and your duty is an illusion. But I sat on that bench, and I heard the offer, and I chose the cold. Not because the cold is better. The cold is not better. The cold is awful. The cold is driving the same 46 stops for 11 years, and knowing your daughter is in a facility, and knowing you can't fix her, and knowing the stop will be there tomorrow and the day after and the day after. I chose it because the alternative was a bus going somewhere I couldn't come back from, driven by a man who used to be a person and was now a route. And because Lily calls on Wednesdays, and because one Wednesday, maybe not this one, maybe not the next, she's going to say something that isn't angry, and I need to be here for that. Here, on this side, driving the figure 8, counting 46. Not 47. Never 47. This post has been shared 4,112 times. The Transit Authority has not responded to requests for comment. If you drive a city bus and there's a stop on your route that wasn't there yesterday, keep driving. Don't check the schedule. Don't read what's under the plexiglass. Don't sit on the bench. And if it knows your name, change routes. You won't, though. That's the thing about routes. They become the shape of your life, and then they become your life. And then one day there's a new stop, and you have to decide whether the life you've been driving is the one you want to keep. I keep mine, every morning, one loop at a time.